But it's so important for us to understand what wisdom is, because wisdom, it's not the test scores that you got. It's not what you got on the report card. I once heard this story of Albert Einstein. When he was traveling somewhere in the Northeast, he was going by train, and as the conductor walked through his car, he was taking tickets, and so he's checking his pockets, and he has that moment where he can't find the ticket, and he checks in his breast coat pocket. He can't find it. He looks in his briefcase. He can't find it. And so the conductor comes to him and says, "Dr. Einstein, it's okay. We know who you are. We'll just consider this even." And so as he continued to walk through the car, he was taking tickets from other people who he might not have known because, the hair, the Einstein hair thing, plus being a person of a great renown. But this conductor, he turned around for just a moment and he saw Albert Einstein down on his hands and knees. He's looking under every single chair. And he says, "Dr. Einstein, you can stop. We know who you are." And he says, "Listen, I know who I am. I just don't know where I'm going." That, in a nutshell, is the difference that wisdom makes. Because wisdom is not merely the ability to retain facts or to apply formulas to a certain situation. It is knowing where you're going and knowing how you're going to get there. That's what we read about here in this passage. Starting at verse 13. "Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." When you look at the character of wisdom, in many ways it is very similar to the character of faith. You should look at them almost in similar sorts of terms, because wisdom is not just knowing stuff. Wisdom, as Bruce Waltke, just brilliant theologian, put it this way in his commentary on the book of Proverbs. He said that wisdom is the art of skillful living. It is the art of skillful living. It's knowing how to take what God has given you in terms of truth and to apply it to the situation in which you are living. And it might have a different look in your workplace than it does in your family, because you have different people. And it's a different kind of vibe of what's going on. And so this is part of what we must see here in the nature of wisdom. But if you look at verse 13, what James does is he really sets the table. He's going to have a comparison and contrast between false wisdom and true wisdom. But here's how he sets the table in verse 13. He says, "Who is wise and understanding among you?" In other words, how do I know if I have wisdom or not? Here's the answer. By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. You say you have faith? Fine, show me. You have wisdom? Fine, show me. It's not a tell me kind of thing. Don't tell me about how wise you are, because if you have to tell me how wise you are, then you aren't. In so many ways, over the last few days, Caleb has been applying to these grad schools because he wants to study artificial intelligence. Because the narrative that's being cast to us by the entire world is that machines do it better, right? That's the message. Machines do it better, except in wisdom. See, artificial intelligence does not have wisdom, but what we are able to do with wisdom, and this is something that you don't have to have a computer program, you don't have to have the right technology. All we have to do is go back to James chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, where the question is asked, is any of you needing or lacking in wisdom? Ask God, and he will give it to you. Remember that? So this was a hallmark of wisdom, and James comes back around to this idea of what wisdom is here in this passage. So let's unpack this a little bit further as we look at the nature of what does wisdom look like. Now first, maybe James is handling it in this way. What does it not look like? Sometimes we have to start there. When I'm learning how to play a song on my guitar, knowing what it does not sound like is good. That will get me a long way of what it's not supposed to sound like. It's not supposed to be that chord. It is supposed to be this chord. Here, in this idea of wisdom, what is worldly wisdom like? Well, we're asking the question, and the answer is furnished to us in verses 14 through 16. Here's what it's like. It's jealous and it's selfish. That's what worldly wisdom is. That's what false wisdom is. It will be jealous. It will be selfish. In other words, 90% of what we see in the world today, right? It's so easy to pick on Wall Street or to pick on Washington, D.C. Let's just put our targets there because it's easy, because we see selfish ambition just off the chain, right? You see people seeking undiluted power. Why? Because they want it. And they are either jealous of someone having that power, or selfishly, they want to have the power themselves. That's typically what we see. And what does it produce? That's what we read in verses 15 and following. It produces disorder and every vile practice. Again, going to Washington, D.C. and Wall Street, is that what we find? Yeah, disorder. Yeah, every vile practice. All the jealousy that is just unleashed, especially every 2 and 4 years in an election cycle, we will see that. We will also see that up in Wall Street when it's time for earnings to be filed on a quarterly basis. You will see what their true agenda is. Is it really to bring value to their consumer? No, it's to make money. In contrast, the way of wisdom is far better. Why? First, the source. What is the source of this false wisdom? James says it to us in quite bold colors in verse 15. He says, "This is not the wisdom which comes down from above, but this kind of wisdom that we're seeing, it is earthly, it is unspiritual, it is demonic. It comes from hell." Now you can try to soft pedal it, but James doesn't. So let's not. Let's call it what it is. So let's look at this true wisdom In contrast, it has about 7 or 8 characteristics, depending on how you divide up the verses. And when you look at these kinds of vice and virtue lists, I don't know about you, but for me, it can get intimidating. That when you look at the list of 6 or 7 or 8 things that you need to do or add to your life, it feels to me like being on a diet. Okay? Am I having enough protein on any given day? Am I drinking enough water? Do I have enough dietary fiber? Am I having too much sodium? Did I go work out today or not? You feel me? That's what it feels like. But so let's look at this a different way. Let's ask ourselves a question of, am I? Just ask the question, am I, before each one of these. The first, we see that the wisdom that comes from above is pure. What does that mean? That means it doesn't have a hidden agenda. Am I pure? Or do I come to people and situations and conversations with an agenda where I'm trying to get my own way? It is also peace-loving. Am I really? Do I really want peace, or do I think that that's boring stuff? It is also considerate. Am I? Am I considerate? In other words, do I like to throw my weight around? Am I being a bully? Submissive. Oh, that's a word we love hearing in America, right? We love hearing, yes, you are supposed to be submissive. What does this mean? It means, are you teachable or not? When you're thinking with all your might that 2 plus 2 equals 5, are you willing to have someone come beside you and say, listen, friend, I like you. And the reason I'm going to prove it to you is I'm going to tell you that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And here's how it works out. Are we willing to hear that? And I don't just mean mathematical facts. I mean, when someone comes to us and says, have you considered this about your life? Have you considered this about the Word of God? Would you read it more? Have you considered this about prayer? Will you seek God's face more than you're seeking the favor of the people on your social? After being submissive, merciful, are we? Are we merciful people? Or do we really want to let them have it when they've messed up? Impartial. In other words, fair. Am I? This is another word for justice. Am I willing to look at people and see them the way that God sees them? Or am I unfair with them? And do I expect more of them than I expect of myself? Am I sincere? Or is this just words? Is this just a game? Or is this just some sort of a power play? This is what we see is the character of true wisdom. What does it produce? It produces peace. Now, what is peace? I think this is a big piece of what, a big piece, P-I-E-C-E, of peace, P-E-A-C-E, is understanding what is being said in the original language. This is a word, I'm going to go with the Hebrew guys, the word shalom. Good word, big word, massive word. It's a word that means that there's an absence of conflict for sure. So that's there. But it's more than that. If in the book of Job, he refers to how there was peace in his flocks. And what he means there is that there's a lack of conflict, and it also means that it's whole. His flocks are whole. They haven't been split down the middle by a pack of wolves. And so when we talk this word shalom, this word peace, it's this huge word that's talking about being made whole again. Because isn't that the reality that we face in the gospel, is that we were created and that we fell, and then because of that fell, all sorts of brokenness entered into our world, and God had to come and He had to redeem us, and He's in the process now of restoring us. That is the gospel in a 4-step nutshell. So here, when we're thinking about the life that we're living now as the believers in Jesus Christ, He should be making us more and more whole. Now we have peace with God, Romans 5:1. And how was that accomplished? That was accomplished through Jesus Christ. I want you to see that connection here, because, see, we have peace through Jesus Christ. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, we read this: "But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God." You see how the wisdom of God, who is Jesus Christ, has made us whole. This is where the gospel comes in. And this is where we should be smiling and saying, yes, there's a hope and there's a future for me, because it doesn't depend on my feelings about whether I feel at peace or not. Has Jesus won the war or has He not? If He has won the war, then peace is possible. Obviously, peace with God, but also peace with one another. That God has torn down the separation wall by sending Jesus into this world. This is why Advent matters. This is why it matters that the Son of God came into our world, so that we might have peace. Not a peaceful, easy feeling, to give us real peace. To give us this sense that we may be whole with one, we may have good, righteous, healthful relationships with one another. But it only starts when we have a relationship like that with God. If you're listening online and you don't know what I'm talking about, you're like, I don't, what? Simply message us. I would love to talk with you about the peace that surpasses understanding that we are given by the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is the reason why we live and exist, is to have a relationship with Him, because as we are made whole and as we live in our neighborhoods, in our places where we do business and recreate, then people around us are able to see more and more that peace is possible. Is peace possible in the Middle East? Yes. You know why? Jesus. But that's the only way it's going to happen. I mean, you can dispatch all your NGOs that you want over there, and please do. It's good work that they do. But good work is no substitute for true peace, for peace with God and with one another.